You've been quite critical about higher education, mainstream higher education, and have even encouraged students to get out of a class and innovate beyond the campus. Tell us a bit about why you became a skeptic.
We've had a series of bubbles in this country, and so I think in a world where there has not been a lot of growth, but in which people have this cornucopian theory that growth automatically happens, what's happened instead has been a lot of misinvestment in stories of growth. And so the tech bubble in the 90s was unfortunately more fraudulent than real. But people bought into it because they believed we lived in an age of miraculous progress. The housing bubble of the last decade similarly had this element where people assumed that things would relentlessly get better in our society, therefore housing prices had to go up. And so again, a belief in progress in a world which was not progressing, that combination helped create these bubbles. And so I think one of the questions one has to ask is, why have there been so many bubbles? And one diagnosis I have on it is that people have believed in a very rapid progress, even though not as much has been happening as advertised, and that combination has led to all this malinvestment. I think we have, at this point, a very serious bubble in education, where people are told this is a great thing to invest in, that human capital is the best thing one can invest in, and of course we are immediately forbidden to ask what the returns on these investments are, how to measure it. That sounds like an incredibly crass sort of a thing to do. And I think very much like the housing bubble, it probably has many similar parallels. Probably the subprime part of education is the worst.
I'm sure none of this applies to Harvard or Stanford.
There's
surely not a bubble here. Or is there?
But I think that, I think how it all ends is quite hard to say. How these bubbles normally end is there's less that goes into a sector, and people start thinking for themselves. And so, the education bubble is driven by something that's overvalued and intensely socially believed as the be-all and end-all, as the magic solution to all of our problems. And it probably will end when people start thinking for themselves. And so my somewhat abstract advice is that you should think for yourself. And I think when I look back on my own trajectory, the mistake that it's hard to know whether I would do it differently. I might still go to college and law school. But a mistake I made was never thinking about what the purpose of it was or why I was doing it. It was just this automatic thing that you did because you were told if you did it, you'd have all these options that would get created, and it would all sort of automatically work out on its own. And in retrospect, I would have tried to think harder about why I was doing it and where I saw it going.
Because this would be a familiar story if you had dropped out of Stanford and become a billionaire. But you kind of played it much straighter than Steve Jobs educationally. Was there a moment when you sort of accumulated 2 or however many degrees when you thought, this is all completely pointless? Did you have a moment of doubt about the education that you had excelled at?
Well, I think there was a moment of doubt at the point when I got onto Wall Street, and you realized that it was basically like this never-ending tournament, and the tournament just keeps going on and on. And once you realize that the tournament's not over in high school, and it's not over in college, and it's not over after that, it forced me to ask more questions about, was this the correct tournament? Was there time to do something different? And I do think that's one of the misconceptions. So one of the big questions about education is, what sort of a good is it? Is it an investment decision, a consumption decision? I think most people think of it as an insurance product, where you're buying insurance to protect yourself from falling through the cracks in our society. I think even that's problematic, because we should be asking why there's so many big cracks, rather than how do I protect myself from it. But the reality is that it's mostly just a tournament, and you have to win the tournament. You have to be realistic about winning the tournament, and the kind of speech that people probably do not give at Harvard, and this is where I think even Harvard is probably wrong, would be, or at Brown or any other university, would be, freshman orientation, congratulations, you won the last round of the tournament, and now it's going to just get much harder. and you better redouble the effort because there are a lot of people who are ahead of you, and if you can't see them, they're so far ahead of you that you can't even see them. And if you were to try to give a version of that speech, I don't think you would last very long as president of any university. Even a much lesser version of that would probably get you booted